The poem Stealing by Carol Ann Duffy from her collection Selling Manhattan is set in the UK in 19 for support and help to get him or her out of their situation. The persona is a thief, as we know from the very first line, and the persona talks about how he or she has stolen the snowman, and that's the most unusual thing they've ever stolen. Stealing a snowman is considered as a senseless crime because a snowman has no real value, but it could be perceived as that the persona has stolen the snowman for company because he is psychologically disturbed and feels very lonely and cold inside. He's also hurt. The persona is also hurt and angry, or bored and lonely from the unemployment, the riots, and the social unrest happening around that time, and is probably trying to look for solutions, but there are not many, and is trying to assert their own personality in throughout the poem. The themes recurring in the poem are of class resentment and juvenile delinquency. The interesting thing about the collection Selling Manhattan is that it comes from all the poems in Selling Manhattan are criticizing capitalist attitudes, and is also how initially Manhattan was owned by Native Americans and was bought from Native Americans by a Dutch settler, and they bought it only for $24, which is so one of the prominent themes in this collection throughout is the way that people with a lot of wealth abuse their power, and the working class isn't given much power, which is an interesting way to analyze this poem, knowing where it comes from. The tone of the poem could be the persona's tone in his or her voice, and therefore could be viewed as either sneering and aggressive, where the persona thinks of themselves as higher than others, but could also more likely be perceived as asking for help, because throughout the poem, the persona is basically seeking for somebody to talk to, seeking for company, and seeking for a purpose. And the toughness is just masking all the vulnerable attitudes within the persona. Another reason that the poem could have a tone of asking for help is because the purpose of Carol Ann Duffy's writing, the purpose for writing this poem was to empathize with people who lost a lot of things during the economic recession and couldn't regain whatever they lost. The form of this poem is it begins and ends with a question, which shows that while the persona has framed a very rhetorical question, they've also ended with a question, knowing that it's natural speech, and also because it's it is a real life, and there is no solution that the persona has achieved so far in his or her lifetime. The voice of the persona again is ambiguous, because I think Carol Ann Duffy wanted us to perceive the persona as a mystery voice, because it's not important what the sex of the person is, and it's more important about the ideas that the voice is conveying, and she wanted us to focus on the ideas more than the persona herself or himself. There's no rhyme scheme or particular meter associated with the poem. It's written in natural speech, so the thoughts are flowing and are not, and she's not trying to organize them in any certain way. There are a lot of literary devices that help us understand the purpose and meaning of the poem as well. There's an allusion to Shakespeare in the last stanza when the persona says, "I nicked a bust of Shakespeare once." which kind of also shows that while the person might be educated because he or she knows about Shakespeare, he or she cannot, has potential, but has not been provided with the opportunities to use that potential because of the economic conditions, and therefore has turned to methods of stealing, further linking it back to the title of the poem. This illusion is helpful because Shakespeare is a widely known concept, and everybody who reads this poem can now know that the persona was actually educated but simply couldn't display his talent. There's a use of telegraphic speech throughout the poem. Midnight, mirrors, boredom all show how when somebody is talking in a conversational tone, they would have pauses and then provide more information about the idea. And it also shows us the persona's train of thought and how he or she transitions from one place to the other. A lot of imagery throughout the poem is of dark, icy, cold nature, which is again shown in the phrases beneath the winter moon, a mind as cold as the slice of ice, piercing my gut, are all examples of how the poet is trying to create a mood of cold and icy nature. There's also a lot of violent and destructive behavior, which is displayed by phrases such as slice of ice within my own brain, my breath ripped out, I could eat myself. But then there is also a sense of the poet, the persona trying to glamorize himself or herself and show almost trying to act like God or some kind of authority in the situation. There are phrases such as, I wanted him, part of the thrill, the children would cry in the morning, life's tough, I sigh like this, mostly I'm so bored, which again shows that he or she considers themselves as the ultimate persona and would do almost anything to just entertain themselves. It's almost as if the persona also knows that there are consequences but has no care or compassion for the results. The tone of the speaker is again cynical and cruel, but the speaker's toughness makes him or her kind of vulnerable, and it's almost appealing for our sympathy. The snowman throughout the poem is an extended metaphor for the cold and loneliness in his or her life. We can see that throughout the poem in phrases like he frozen stiff, hugged to my chest, a fierce chill piercing. And then I was standing alone amongst lumps of snow, sick of the world. This again emphasizes the image of dark and icy cold, but also shows us the recurring themes of class resentment and loneliness, and which is probably a cause of the persona's psychopathic behavior. His loneliness is also shown by the phrases where the persona says, "Better off dead than giving in," which shows that he or she is determined to fight back against the society and the administration of Margaret Thatcher, and is probably responding to Thatcher's government, which had a culture of greed and ignored the working class. It also shows that he or she is feeling sad about themselves also slowly, and feel worthless and without a purpose in life. The phrase, "One time I stole a guitar and I thought I might learn to play it," which shows that they feel like they don't have any sort of control over their life. And just after that phrase, there's a phrase of, "I nicked a bust of Shakespeare once, flogged it," which also shows that perhaps there was no vocational training given to the kids at school, and they were only taught Shakespeare, which was irrelevant in the world of employment. Therefore, the persona had to turn to stealing. To conclude, the poem stealing by Margaret Thatcher from the collection cell in Manhattan is a response to Margaret Thatcher's government, and also shows how a person, when ignored and not given the opportunity to fulfill their potential, can turn out harmful, and also how the persona just needs opportunities and counseling and some sort of human help for him or her to realize their true potential. This poem is very similar to another one of Carol Ann Duffy's poems, Education for Leisure, which is from the album Standing Female Nude, and is also about somebody who turns to psychotic behavior and turns to street violence because he or she is unemployed. And Standing Female Nude is a collection where Duffy puts emphasis on the roles and perspectives of people we don't often hear about, and is therefore a strong poem about the capitalist attitudes of the people in the UK at that time.